Hello, beautiful children. It's Mrs. Day, and boy, oh boy, do I have a poetry form for you today. She's the all-time favorite. We love her because her rules are simple and finite. Or are they? Or are they? Let's find out together because the poetry form for today is the beautiful haiku. That's right, haikus. My goal today is to teach you to review some things I think a lot of people probably already know about haikus, but hopefully to add to your knowledge a couple of things you maybe didn't know about the beautiful Japanese poetic form, the haiku. Let me start with what I think a lot of people will already know about haikus. A haiku is a poem made up of 17 syllables. There are 5 syllables in the first line, 7 syllables in the second line, and 5 syllables in the third and last line. If you know one thing about haikus, this is probably what you know. You know it goes 5, 7, 7, 5, 7, 5. That's what makes up a haiku. Here's your example. Falling August stars, the sky is full of beauty. So many wishes. Falling August stars, 5 syllables. The sky is full of beauty, 7 syllables. So many wishes, 5 syllables. The haiku goes 5, 7, 5. The other things that I think you might already know about haikus is that they originated in Japan and that they are traditionally about nature and the seasons. Haiku is usually about nature and the seasons like this. The light of a candle is transferred to another candle. Spring, twilight, about nature and about the seasons. Now, some of you just went, hey, Ms. Day, wait a second. That haiku doesn't have... Give me a minute. Give me just a minute. I'm going to talk about that thing you just noticed. Some of you are backing it up like, what did I miss? I'm going to talk about that thing. Give me a second. All right. So the things that I thought a lot of people probably already knew about haikus. They go 5, 7, 5, 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables. They come from Japan. They are often about nature and natural things like the seasons. Okay. What good am I to you if I'm not adding to your knowledge in some way? So moving on to the things I thought you might not know. The first one is that haikus were developed from as sort of a response to the poetry that came before them, which was really long. It was long, elaborate. It had all these rules. This is just one example of a renga poem, which is one of the forms that came before haiku. This is just one piece. This is just one tiny piece of this incredibly long, incredibly intricate poetry. And here's a haiku. You also might not have already known that the haiku was developed in the 1600s, but wasn't actually called a haiku until the 1800s. There's like a fun fact you can share with people. The next thing that you might not have already known about the haiku gives me an opportunity to maybe teach you a new word. That new word is juxtaposition. Juxtaposition, when you put two very different things next to each other. So I have some visual juxtapositions here. Two very different women, or at least visually different women, right next to each other. You will see juxtaposition in photography where you have all this nature and natural stuff, and then right in it or right next to it, something made by human beings. Haikus often feature juxtapositions of images or ideas. So here is an example. Summer grass, the wheels of a locomotive come to a stop. It's juxtaposing, that's the verb, juxtaposing, putting next to each other the vision of lovely summer grass and suddenly this harsh or this like man-made object. So juxtaposition, or the opposite things or very different things being put right next to each other, very common in haikus. Now, a bunch of you just said, hey, wait a second, Mrs. Day, that haiku doesn't... Give me a moment. Some of you have no idea what I'm talking about because you're just watching this. But some people noticed something about those two example haikus. I'm gonna come back to it. Hang on a second. The other thing, or the last thing about haikus that I thought you might not already know, besides that, They were a sort of a reaction to these older, longer, very formal poems, besides that they often include juxtapositions or opposite or different things set right next to each other. The other thing that I thought you might not already know is that while haikus have these short phrases, they often carry with them very strong images. Imagery, kids, you might remember, is when a poet or a writer puts a picture in your head. They use language to almost force you to picture something in your mind. Haikus often, even though they have short phrases, often have these really strong images. Here's an example for you. Over the wintry forest, winds howl in rage with no leaves to blow. That image of winds howling in rage, it's also personification. For those of you who are paying attention, it's also personification, but it's this very strong, forceful, powerful, vivid image that the poet puts into our minds. The idea of winds howling with rage. So the other thing that I thought you might not already know about haikus is that they have these really strong images with them. Hold on a second. That haiku, here it is. I said I'd get to it. Here's me getting to it. As I've been giving these examples, some of you have been thinking to yourself, Mrs. Day, you're such a liar. You said haikus have 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables, but a bunch of the ones that you gave us as examples don't even have that. You're right. You're absolutely right. I did it on purpose. I did it on purpose because I think of it as being my job to teach you a thing, for sure, and also to expose you to some of the most famous versions of that thing. Now, riddle me this, precious children. Why, oh why, might some of the most famous haikus in history, some of the most famous literary examples of haikus, not have the 5-syllable, 7-syllable, 5-syllable pattern? Think, why? No, for real, think about it. Why might some of the most famous and the best haikus ever written in history not follow the rules of haiku? Did you get it? Did you get it? The answer, beautiful children, is translation. Where did I say haikus originated? Japan, which means many of them, the masters, the people who were writing the haikus, probably wrote them in Japanese. Sorry. They probably wrote them in Japanese. They did. And so many of them, when they're translated over, don't follow the 575. They did in Japanese, though. And in case you're interested, here is an example. This is from one of the most famous haiku writers. His name is Maso Basho. And did I get that right? I did not get it right. It's Matsuo Basho. Sorry. One of the most famous haiku poets, Matsuo Basho, wrote this lovely poem, Old Pond, a frog jumps in, the sound of water. Now that's not 575 in English, but it is in Japanese. And because I thought you might be interested, here's what it sounded like in the original Japanese.
古池や河津飛び込む水の音
Pretty, right? It's pretty. And that's it. That's what I have to say about haikus. Haikus are poems made up of 17 syllables. There being 5 in the first line, 7 in the second line, 5 in the third line. In English, or in whatever language they're written in, they go 575. Haikus were, they originated in Japan. They were often about nature and the season. Things I wanted you to learn that I thought you might not have known before now. Haikus were a response or a reaction to the longer poetic forms that came before them. They often feature juxtapositions of images or ideas, and they also often have very strong imagery within them. That's it, beautiful children. Once again, if we are in class together right now, our next step is to identify some pieces of haiku and decide whether something is a haiku based on the poem that we see. And then we're going to write one. We're going to write one together. All right, let's get started.